Okay, so just a quick note on the daisy. When I was talking about shading in a little bit at the base of the petals, what I've done here is I just quickly drew the center of the daisy. What I did was I just kind of made a dotted line around here because we don't want a solid hard line, and then I just filled in with making just dots and dots and dots. And this is just kind of it just takes a little bit of time to get that in, and of course the more dots you have, the darker it looks. So now what I was talking about, coloring it at the base of the leaves, you can see where this looks a little more 3D and the leaves are very flat right now, so we went from line to making this shape. Now we want to turn these into more of a 3D thing and really give the impression that they go behind this. And talking about how things that look a little bit darker or things that are darker will look a little further away. So if you look here, you can see there's some lines here, more like cross hatching to kind of show a little bit of darkness. So that's what we kind of want to do here, is just make these leaves a little dark at the base where they kind of go in. They would be a little bit shaded because they would be disappearing behind this shape. Now I have two overlapping here. The one in the back is going to be a little darker. I should have done that there too. A little darker. And then you just really quickly get light. And this one I'm going to leave it just a little light there so it looks different than that one. And then the petals naturally have a center crease in them, so that should be there as well. And then just very carefully, darker where it disappears behind the central part of the flower, and then lighter as it goes up again. And this you could switch over to an H pencil and do this, and it's real easy just to keep it nice and light. And then down here, this is going to, this will be, because this is underneath all this will be a little bit more in the shadow. The light won't quite reach under there. So you can see here there's a couple little marks that show that that's a little darker. We can make that darker and then get lighter and then lighter. And again, this is kind of all goes back to that value study, making things darker and then lighter and then lighter. And this is exactly how you would use that particular lesson. Darker here, and then just a little bit lighter and lighter and lighter. And then there would be that little crease in the middle there. So then you end up with something that's a little more 3D. In real life, if you were looking at a flower, you may see more shadows. Even though this is a perfectly white flower, there may have been places where the whole petal, instead of appearing white, it might appear gray just because of where the shadows fall on it. Okay, so that's the flower. Just a little bit about what we talked about with the chickadee. I'll just move this here like this. When you're doing something that has this kind of fuzzy appearance, and I know you didn't do this, but the temptation is to say, okay, it's a round tummy, and to draw. And the left side says, well, it's round, draw a round line. But that presents a problem because that you want it to look really fluffy. So instead of drawing a solid line like this, and I think we talked a little bit about using guidelines, what we want to do is make just a nice little dotted line, and that's our guideline for how fluffy that's going to look. And that if we want to, we can continue with the rest of the bird with just light lines. And then you can see this is where I talked about how the back has just a nice gentle curve. Just a nice curve. It kind of goes down, and then there's almost like kind of a secondary curve that goes down, and then this comes over. The chickadee is a fun bird because the head is kind of stocky, and then the body is small. So the head is pretty big compared to the shape of the body compared to some other birds. So it just has this real friendly, fun look to it. So you want to make sure you have that real, I don't want to say the word stumpy, but that real look of just of a round little blobby bird. Okay, so we have this very light dotted line. Now we can go back, and just like you did with your pencil, we can go back, and then those dotted lines just kind of vanish. They just kind of go away, and we just by making marks over top of them, and they're very nice and light. Okay, talked a teeny little bit about making dark eyes inside of a dark space, and you'll see this with the raccoon that we're going to do in a little bit. We know the eye's there, but it's black on black, and we want to make sure that it gives a hint that the eye's there. So what we want to do, and because this was planning ahead for something that we want to look fuzzy, this is also planning ahead. Now I'm going to make this a little bigger just to exaggerate it so you can see. I'm going to get quite a bit bigger. Let's say this is where the eye is going to be. It's going to look really freaky, I know. We want to get the shape of the eye in first, and because it's going to all be colored in black, it doesn't have to be super duper light. Then we would go back, and again, a really nice sharp pencil, and make a line, another circle, really, 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 really close to that first circle. And then we're going to leave a place for reflection. And you can add this even though you don't actually see the reflection, because it's a nice touch, and it's really, even though it may not be in the drawing you're copying, it's just a nice, it adds a little oomph to your animal. So what I'm going to do is on the top half of the eye, on the top half of that circle, I'm going to make just this little crescent shape. And that's going to be about where I want to save a place for the reflection. So now I'm going to color in, because the eye is black, I'm going to color in everything inside that first circle except where I left that crescent shape. And if it looks too big, I mean, I can adjust it. I can make it a little smaller. Then, because we know that the chickadee has this black cap, now we go back and we color in up to the outside circle. And so we planned ahead and used a strategy. And it doesn't matter. You don't necessarily want to make this a perfect white rim that's showing. Some birds do have a beautiful little white ring around their eye. But we're just doing this to show that there's an eye there. So even if you accidentally color some of it in and just leave a little rim here and there, it will give you the feeling that there's an eye there, a black eye inside of this black cap on the black cap chickadee. All right, so that's kind of how you get how you get an eye to show up when you have a black eye in the middle of a black ground, or like black feathers or black fur, what have you. Okay, when it comes to doing the feathers on the bird, back in here, when birds fold up their wings, it's very organized. It's very tidy and neat. So we have this part coming down here. I'm going to focus just on this part back here. The feathers fold up, and they're very much in a nice straight line. And so you can see the hint of the straight lines here. And then there's a couple that stay white. There's a couple that get really dark. There's no perfect way. One time I had to paint a background for an exhibit, and they wanted a sunset. And I agonized over that sunset and the clouds and everything. And then when I started looking at clouds and things, there's really no wrong way to do clouds. Anything. If you start looking at clouds, you could do almost anything. And if you start watching them, they're every shape, every size, every color of lights and mediums and darks. So the same with this is we have these lines here. As long as you give the general idea that these lines are parallel, then I went back, and because it's not a white wing, it's gray, I go back and I can go over top of them just to cross hatch. And cross hatching is what I did here. And you can cross hatch. I like to kind of keep going in the direction that the wing is going, so that it kind of makes it more cohesive. And so there's some darker places down here, so I would go back. Oops, my pencil needs to be sharpened. Okay, and then here it's super dark, and then up here we have this little curve, and then we would start here and make the feathers, again, very organized, very orderly, going this way, and then color them in just various ways. The tail, you can see I did the outline of the tail and then just cross-hatched it so it would appear more gray. All right, just the, when we have the definite, this is kind of like what I was talking about with Baloo, with or was it Wilson? I think it was Wilson, has the gray muzzle. There's, if you have black up against white or black up against kind of a gray, you want to make sure that you kind of make a transition between the two. So you don't want a straight line like that. You kind of want some lines that go in different directions. You want some of the black going up into the gray, into the white, and some of the white going down into the black. So just a little bit of overlap, and it takes away kind of a stark look, and it looks a little blended, but you can see that right away it goes from dark to light. And then same here. And you might have to plan, because if you make it all dark, then you have to erase a place where the white goes in. Okay, but you can see that it's a little bit of an area where it's not clearly dark, not clearly light. It's kind of a mix of black going into white and white going into black. Okay, so that's what I think those are the main things I wanted to point out about the Chickadee. How to make the black on black eyes, and then just talking about when you know something wants to look fuzzy, give yourself a nice dotted line as a guideline, and then you can go back, and the minute you add the fuzzies, your guideline goes away. Okay. Okay, I'll end that with this video, and I'll show you. We'll talk about the puffin and upside down, and then we'll get into the raccoon.